Hello, I am Radagast, at your service. So it's a beautiful day here in Woodstock, New York. It's sunny. Got the window open with a nice breeze, which will be blowing the incense smoke in my face momentarily. And I'd say it's 42 degrees here Fahrenheit. I guess that's around 10 Celsius. One of these days I'll get that. Fahrenheit is almost too exact. Alright, so the interview with the ambassador, Distillation and commentary. And this is based on the 2-hour interview that the very brilliant Martin put together, I guess with his English Drama Club. Hope I got that right. And so he put together an interview asking questions that many people would be asking, and also asking questions after, that many people have after hearing the ambassador for months. There's certainly, in my opinion, I never thought the ambassador was unclear. If I had had a chance to ask him questions, most of them would have covered material that I thought wasn't covered. I really thought a lot of questions that often people asked were covered in the material, but again, in the ambassador's both diplomatic and I'll call connecting the dots way, because sometimes some of the things he's saying might contain, if they were said in very straight out, could be traumatizing. And the ambassador speaks often of, this will traumatize the people, and it's really a very decent consideration on his part, because he realizes there are certain news that can shock people. As a matter of fact, I'll be closing probably with one of those things, which would be disclosure. But so the first question that Martin asked the ambassador is, "Who are you?" And it basically, the ambassador says he works in world finance, and goes on to get into what his involvement is. But I don't really see how other than he's been high enough up, and because of his family station, but also because of his merit. He's the kind of person who could pick up a phone, and I think Ron said this last night, and talk to the head of any security apparatus in the world. I can't imagine that, like myself, speaking about the family, that they don't know more about my family genealogy now than I do. That's fine with me, because I really like a world of transparency, where once again, who your parents are, that's not quite such a private thing. And so he has worked in the world of finance and security. Oh no, he doesn't work in finance. He works, he knows about finance. Okay, kind of picking the stuff out. Security, and he knows about finance. Although he says constantly that when people ask him for financial information, that is not his expertise. But let's please understand that a person who comes from a place where expertise really means being elite at what you do. Again, elite does not apply to money. Elite is about performance. So if it comes to security, well then the ambassador would probably be able to speak as an elite in that topic. Where when it comes to finance, although he's quite knowledgeable, and more knowledgeable than most bankers that he's met, especially with regarding the screens, he very forthrightly always says, "This is not my expertise," because he realizes that the amount of knowledge on that one subject is broader than he has, and he humbly lets people know that's I'm not elite in that fashion. And again, the word elite is about being competent and above. Like there's a competent, and then there are people who are just kind of a little more uber competent. That's elite. And so he asked them about what's the message, and he goes on to let people know that the family has been around for thousands and also hundreds of years. I guess you might define, because there have been different, I guess you have the families that came after the flood, the families that basically came from Atlantis, and then that level of first establishing new civilizations, and then as they outgrow the distance, that would probably happen. Of course, keeping the connections, and so in their capacity to have the wherewithal on all levels, and by wherewithal I also mean the ability to understand how a civilization works, because they came from a civilization. And so basically they became the overseers by being competent enough to do that. And when we look at many of, let's look at England, when Sumeria was the center of civilization, and many parts of England, I'm not saying all of England or that island or even Ireland, were people living in huts, but large populations of them were. And so there were, we can see how after the flood there was a considerable amount of time that passed before the influence of civilization, for good and bad, could happen. And so these families have been there for a long time, protecting humanity's assets, because they always saw themselves as keepers of the assets. And of course, whenever you have somebody who's holding assets, and over the course of thousands of years, sometimes it could be 10,000 years, you might have a few people who are in fact the managers, who, again, the assets are so huge that some people might say, oh, I can indulge myself a little bit. But then again, this is all in the past. We're really moving forward. So, and the funds and the assets are to repurpose the planet. Now, repurpose comes at every level. It comes from repurposing how we conceive of ourselves, what we conceive of the society, what our own personal contribution or even responsibility to make society function is. And then, of course, also the assets that really are much more about the, as I call it, money as a stimulant. And also just the whole idea of you want to facilitate trade. If you don't have something that somebody else wants that you need, having something that they value was something that you could use in trade. And in the past, gold was not only printed into coins, it's made into goblets, made into jewelry. The gold and silver have enormous amounts of just everyday aesthetic and let's call it technological uses. So he asks the ambassador, "Are you Illuminati?" And the ambassador gets a little bit about, he's part of the European branch of the family. And I've already, in my other videos, I kind of went into Illuminati families, a big concept I call the big illumined ones, those who know. So that would be, I would call the real kind of what Illuminati could be. But right now, when we're saying Illuminati, we're talking really about the Cabal, and specifically the Bavarian Illuminati that got started prior to the French Revolution, and that was done by Adam Weishaupt. And then from that came other little branches. Again, the Bavarian Illuminati was really a cabal takeover of Freemasonry. That's when Freemasonry got poisoned, in my opinion. And then, and also even your basic Freemasonry, which is just the first 3 levels, okay, up to the 3rd degree, a Master Mason, which I am. Those are just lodges, and I can tell you that the function of lodges is community outreach. Having above all Masonic, any Masonic temple, the temples above and downstairs, you have places that you can rent out very inexpensively, and they have full kitchens, and they have bathrooms, and they have tables, and the lodges will have fairs, and discussions are made about the funds that we personally contribute to each lodge, and how we disperse those funds into the community. Sound like a familiar formula that we're going to hear about? My own experience as a Blue Lodge, which the first 3 degrees, Mason, is nothing but outreach to very local communities. And then, of course, Masons are very well known for having burn clinics and dialysis clinics and providing the vans to with drivers. I mean, there's who's going to volunteer? Sometimes you have a steady volunteer who actually operates the transportation, getting these people from facility to facility. The Masons at the Blue Lodge level are some of the finest men I've ever met in my life. What goes on above that, I don't know. And and it's, who knows at what level, who knows, again, corruption is personal. Of course, I feel it became systemic with the beginning of the Bavarian Illuminati, and who actually came in as Masons. And the whole story, one of the things that makes this difficult to parse apart, especially with words, is one of the things that the Cabal does is put on the clothes of others and basically become infiltrators. And pulling the infiltration part out of the story becomes very tricky, and also becomes very detail laden. And the more details, and also with polarity thinking, details have us thinking all over the place. I just saw my little brown thumb here. Details all over the place, and then we get distracted. And that's really what they want. They want us distracted on details. They want people picking sides, like in politics. And then rather getting to an answer, we argue over who has the details right and how they're interpreted. I mean, it's all real mindfuck, all right? That's what it is. And you either fall for it or you don't. And part of it isn't, and you don't learn not to fall for it by knowing more. You learn not to fall for it by knowing yourself and starting to get out of polarity thinking and starting to be creative enough to think. And not just take have a bunch of facts and you go, I like these facts, I don't like these facts, and you create the polarity. That is that's a mind construct. It has nothing to do with reality, and the reality you create from that kind of thinking is false. All right, protecting humanity's assets and repurposing the planet. That's the whole purpose of what the Dragon family here is doing, is bringing in a new golden age, which is golden at every level, and it's not about the gold. The gold is a symbol. Jubilee. Now, this is where repurposing comes in. Patience and no traumatization. There are a lot of peoples in the Anglo-European American society who are in the 1%. As far as global income earning. So you can be making as little as $50,000 a year, and I think the threshold's even lower, and still be in the global 1%. Now, if you get into the Western 1%, $40,000 is, you're poor. But again, globally, the average person in Western society making, I think it's like somewhere like $35,000, $40,000 would actually put you in the global 1%. So, but in my profession, I run into many people whose annual salaries are north of $100,000. And these are, I'm quite sure within their communities, and they know people, and they have, some leverage. But this is, these are not the world shapers, other than they are lumps of part of the clay that do shape the world through participating in it. But just think of, the shifting, what Jubilee would create a lot of traumatization. Let's say, okay, how many people actually own buildings filled with renters, and they can base part of that rent is based on, hey, I'm making payments. Especially if you buy a house. People who buy a house and then they rent it, and so they have their mortgage payment, and so they try to at least cover the mortgage payment, and usually would try to make a profit, because in capitalism making a profit is everything. Rather than buying a home to provide housing, and of course, again, cover your expenses, but there's a whole level, there's a whole thing of what the market will bear. I've been very fortunate. I've rented in my life. The good deals I found were from good landlords who knew they could be charging me $200 more because that's what everybody else was charging, and they refused to do it because they thought it was ripping people off, and all they really wanted was a fair return. So once the whole problem with capitalism is the whole idea of greed, what the market will bear, rather than how about you're your own market, what can you bear, and how what's fair for you, what's that little service to self, service to other formula where you take care of yourself but you also take care of others. So so there has to be patience. I mean, Jubilee. Let me finish that thing. So how about somebody, again, who's making a really good living, renting out, whether it's, let's say he's bought a small place that can have 6 families, and they are making a very comfortable living on that. All of a sudden, Jubilee comes. They have no claim of owing anything. Any rent that they're getting from you, other than, maybe insurance, is pure gravy. So they'd be in a moral quandary. It's like the rent they were charging you, it would now be just almost extortion at the level it is, and would they adjust? And unless the mindset changes about, regarding that the more profit is somehow indicative of how successful you are, you'd have people who would say, oh my God, I no longer owe all this money, and now I'm rich. I have all these renters who've been paying me this, and I owe nothing on it, and oh my God. So you can see how the mindset would have to change. And if somebody, who was thinking that way, and you say, hey, that's old thinking, we got to think differently, that might be very traumatizing, because one minute they think they're rich, and now they're thinking, oh, I have to give it back, and that's polarity thinking. I'm rich, oh, I have to give it all back. And those are the polarities, and in between is no. You can still be quite comfortable, not giving it all back, but not keeping it all. And this is where polarity thinking, and most people will do that. I got this, or I don't have that. It's really a mind sickness. Repurposing and incompetence. It's just competence in what I just spoke about. I mean, when you think in constant polarity and can't get the clear story, you're not a competent thinker. Really, quite simply. And so, if you can't think competently, it's very hard to get the information you need as you're bouncing off polarity walls. And so they want to. The whole idea is to create social infrastructure. Now think about that social infrastructure. We're going to get back to the landlord who suddenly has six people and thinks that they're very well, they have hit the jackpot, because why would they lower rents? A good social infrastructure is we're now integrated. The person who owns their property is in a relationship with you. They need you because you're part of their revenue stream, and you need them because you need housing. But that's not an antagonistic relationship. That's one where, a marriage can be made in a sense to speak. So that the social infrastructure that allows us to relate to each other on a compassionate and truly social consciousness. So with the Jubilee and the release of funds and the readjustment, there is so many things that we really have to change in our heads for this to happen. So, but this is happening. Everybody goes, oh, we keep on hearing self-reflection, and it's very important. But this has been going on for months, and many people have been doing the self-reflection. So all this work is getting done. It may sound repetitive, and it's helpful because you can read comments and you can see people who haven't self-reflected. And so the message of self-reflection can't be stopped until everybody has gotten the message and starts to say, oh yeah, I was kind of, I have my own culpability in the big picture. Self-reflection allows you to remove your culpability, or at least identify it, and then knowledge is power. And little by little, you can make your adjustments. Nobody's supposed to go, oh my God, I just had an epiphany, and I have to change all this. Well, you might have to, but you don't have to change it all at once. Polarity thinking. Oh, I have to change this. I can't. Oh, it's so much. Pick one. Pick one for the day. Pick one a week. Change. You know, just allow it. Be organic. And that's the other thing. Organic growth isn't you plant a seed and there's your lawn. All right? So we always, when you're thinking, and that's when keep within the organic matrix. Our whole world is a synthetic matrix, unless you go outside and observe the world. I mean, I like one of the things is back to grass. You can't make grass grow faster by pulling on it. You might even break it and have to start over again. So create social infrastructure and then building connections according to needs and strengths, which means both nations and our interactions, landlord and renters. All right, there's needs and strengths. One needs housing and has their own revenue stream. The other one has housing but could use a little more revenue stream. So you can see the dynamics there. I don't have to explain that. All nations are corporations. This is the other issue with Jubilee. Right now, all nations are corporations. And part of the reason the nations became corporations is for the same reason corporations like being corporations. They can deny responsibility. The corporation is the person. The persons are not, are just, these nebulous things. So the corporation gets to stand as the whipping boy, so to speak. Should anything happen, the people who made it happen can skedaddle, and the corporation has to fold. Oh, the corporation went bankrupt. Oh, the poor corporation. All right, so as with all nations as corporations who only operate at a profit, any of their populations are there to basically help with the profit. They're the collateral. Scratch my nose, not while I'm speaking, because scratching your nose while you're speaking is a sign that you might be not telling the truth. So DT will help. Yeah, the dragon family will help people. But the corporations, I mean, they cannot funnel money to people who are the property of criminal corporations, because the corporations will take it. And this is why the patience is required, because the corporations have to be starved. I mean, they only live sucking the blood out of every other things. Why does my nose keep on itching? So they have to be starved, and unfortunately, that's what we're waiting for. But we don't have to wait quite so much if suddenly we got really activist and started pulling the corporations down. I mean, ignorance. What's one of the biggest ignorances we might have regarding our countries is that they're corporations, and they only care about profit. And even more importantly, is they're corporations that basically are run by sociopaths, some psychopaths, and basically all criminals. Nations have become organized crime. And you have, the crime. So the biggest crime family right now is I'll call it the Anglo-American Euro crime family. And then you have tons of other little crime families. BRICS. So that BRICS are also part of the change. They're the political arm. And people like, and I've said this other thing, you might look at Brazil and go, oh boy, if that's what we're looking forward to, I'll stay with the United States. This is all, the BRICS nations are a platform to be built on. It's kind of the concept that BRICS nations could be looked at as, before you build a house, you have the foundation. People come in, they clear the land, they put, they level it, put a little cement block on the ground, and then you can build your house on that. I would say that the BRICS nations are that foundation. Okay, there's really not much to look at. It's more conceptual. The house has not yet been built. And of course, those nations, to be honest, will have to stop being corporations and have sovereign representation, where you have sovereign people who are represented by somebody who actually represents them. And I really believe this means getting rid of political parties, because political parties are duality thinking. It's a way of splitting anything. As I've said before, you can't have politics in your body. The closest thing you see to politics in the body would be schizophrenia and autoimmune diseases, where the body attacks itself. Okay, that's that kind of thing going on there. BRICS. So the BRICS are the political arm of the family, and so again, that political arm right now, what we're seeing is the bone. The muscle is not there, and the skin isn't laid over it either. Reports from the people. Part of the question, one of the questions Martin asked is, how, if the family is benevolent as we're supposed to believe it is, then why is there so much corruption? And it's basically the middlemen. I guess the best way I could say is, let's say one of us won the lottery. Okay, I mean, huge, not one of those 10 million, mega bucks, whatever, huge, basically almost inexhaustible amount. So who's going to show up? Your family and your friends, and they're all going to insist that you need to share, and they're all going to go out and help their friends with it. All right, and then so you give it to them, and then you check in later and you realize that all their friends are still broke, but they have a very nice house and they have a very nice car, and they have a butler and a maid. You get the story. So really, what it comes down to is lots of corruption. And like many of us, if it was our own family who did it, we might say, "Oh, you disgust me," but it's like my family. So you start getting some of the dynamics of the dysfunction of the world today. And you can't fix a problem till you see it. And I believe that part of 555, the mission of 555, is the remittance and surrendering of all, and the family, the ambassador and the Red Dragon family, being from royal lines, are basically saying, yeah, we messed up. Okay, so that's remitting. All right, and also we're here to serve. That's a form of surrender. So but to meet there, we have to, I feel, remit our ignorance about everything. And also surrender from our little petty-minded egos. That's the part we need to surrender. We need to surrender to the lower base, this lower base part of ourselves, and rise into knowledge and gnosis. And gnosis is not ignorant. Gnosis is knowing. BRICS, war. It's a war against tyranny, specifically financial tyranny, but any kind of tyranny, any kind of aggression. And then through aggression, you could say slavery. That's tyranny, and ignorance. And the dragon family is admitting about how through their malfeasance or ignorance, how things got out of hand. And this is the whole. This is you do what you do until you have your moment of awakening. And then once you awaken, you have a responsibility to act. And the ambassador and the Red Dragon family, and all the families that are on board with 555 are demonstrating the attitude, the proper attitude. And we meet by being on the same level that we all can. And then once we meet at that level, because we can do that, because there's nobody can stand between our hearts. See, we can meet heart to heart right now, this second. You can greet them heart to heart, and that connection is made. Once that connection is made, all the other stuff is going to start to fade, because you're going to have an understanding, and you will stop supporting the very slave system that is holding you down. Discernment and seeing through deception. And of course, much of deception is owing two things. Our ignorance, and part of our ignorance is we don't realize that we think in a polarity way. And it's very easy to deceive people when you are purposely polarizing information as much as possible so that it belongs closer. I mean, if you present things polarized, they can't be at the far ends, but they kind of live there, so they're manipulating you not to be in the center where the truth is. Oh, what am I doing for time here? Oh, 30 minutes already. And I'm only on my first page. And and where the ambassador is the voice of the dragon, I guess I'm the translator of the ambassador. Like the time of there was one of the questions about entities, and the ambassador, like the time of Noah, there were many different entities. In the time of Noah, you had watchers. I mean, nobles, and that's one of the things that the ambassador says is that in the word for serpent, in the Torah says nobles, which makes it fairly interesting when you see some, let's say Illuminati TM, that's the trademark, that's the plastic Illuminati. When sometimes they'll have certain titles and they'll say nobles, and so now when you see nobles, you might also think serpents. Again, more questions about the ambassador's involvement with security, in which he just dropped that one of the heads of European security is a Nordic ET of exceedingly high intelligence. And in that story was also about the concepts that the ET has, let's say, regarding depopulation. So right away, it's very easy to get hit that, okay, this person has a screamingly high IQ, but unfortunately, so that shows you about the higher mind. A lot of us who are into chakras, oh yes, let me open up the third eye and the crown chakra. That plain old third eye crown chakra is the kind of hyper intelligence that this Nordic is exhibiting without the compassion. You really don't, you want your upper chakras to be balanced with your lower chakras in your heart. If you don't believe in chakras, fine, but you want this part of you balancing with the lower part of you. Everything's important, but the coordination is where gnosis and wisdom and compassion are, in your heart. And of course, the thymus is a little bit involved, but I mean, and when I say heart, I do not mean emotions. It's not an emotion-free zone. You're rich in your feelings, but there's none of the turbulence of emotions in compassion. Oh yeah, fallen angels equals nobles. All right. Finance, collapse of dollar, the illusion of democracy, plan of the cabal. So I mean, that conversation talked about the possibility of the collapse of the dollar, and of course, the pernicious influence and the way the dollar is used does have to collapse. I mean, the dollar has been set up as the world's main currency, so when you have all these other currencies that have to convert into dollars, there's a fee for that. And sometimes it's also the exchange rates are manipulated, so you get beat on that. And then you buy the dollar, and then you're going to sell it into the other currency, and there's minimally a fee. So on the dollar, you have the incoming one that has to pay whatever transaction at whatever level, and then the outgoing at another. So you have this middleman who's constantly parasitizing on the system, and that's part of why you see the constant de-dollarization going on. Just today it was announced Russia and Egypt will now be dealing in their own currencies. They will not be using the dollar. And what it means is, even if some people still use their own currency, but they use the dollar as a conversion. Now this is a straight trade, and what that means is that the dollar is cut out as the middleman, and this is what is collapsing the dollar. Is that less people that use the dollar are not using. It's like the dollar is really a credit card. There's a fee for every transaction when you use it. So by not using the dollar, it's like these people are paying each other cash instead of through credit, and so that's what's going to erode the dollar. Which again, the dollar doesn't have to collapse. But the behavior with the dollar, as trying to be this middleman to everything that goes on in the world, has to stop. The plan, the illusion of democracy. Yes, you can't have democracy. You can't have a house divided. Who needs democracy when all it does is separate? Democracy is made for ignorant people to make their egos feel satisfied. That's what it's for. You get one group of dummies who knows largely where you lie. That would be the lying politicians on one side, and they will pepper their speech with what you want to hear based on you affiliating with their party. They'll put out all these different things and you go, oh yeah, this represents me, this represents me, this represents me. So they know their talking points. We better say this because this is what this group of ignorant people believes. And then you'll have the other side, and they'll have their list of things that are verboten or want to be promoted, and all the memes and that people believe in. So they grab that group of ignorant people, and the whole ignorance is fed by the media. So you get to see, this is a very, very sick system, and you can only extricate it by realizing where your part in the ignorance lies. If you cannot pick up the mirror and look at yourself and just say, okay, I don't care how bad I look in this mirror, just show me the boogers on my face so I can remove them. I mean, that you have to approach that kind of honesty, because it's only a moment. Actually, if you don't take your ego into it, if you bring your compassion for yourself and humanity into it, there's no trauma in seeing it. There's only like, whew, okay, got stuff to do. And you get to it. And you're not a victim. The moment you say, I got work to do, and there's that fire to get it done, you're not a victim anymore, no matter what it is, because you're purposed. You're repurposed. Okay, creating new Silk Roads. I mean, again, and that's really kind of a phrase. A Silk Road is a road of commerce that works both ways. And of course, the Silk Roads are very aptly named because a big way that the family got much of their wealth was through the Silk Road that went to Venice, where the black nobility have their strength. And when China developed the technology of silk, a very fine material, if you don't mind screaming worms, but a very fine material, and it was very popular, especially in the warmer part of the world, like Italy. I mean, silk is a very versatile fabric. And so suddenly the world wanted silk, and it was even, going to Africa. I mean, silk was going everywhere, and China had the technology of silk. And so what were they trading? I mean, what was coming from Europe? Mainly gold, because almost everything that Europe wanted came from the East. I mean, spices came from the East. I mean, so much came from the East, and basically what the West had to offer was gold. I mean, it was trade. It wasn't like, oh, we're going to gobble up this is a plan to gobble up all the world's gold. We have resources that we want to trade with you, and the only thing you have is gold. So they ended up, so basically the families end up sitting on a lot of the world's gold through trade, not extortion. People throw in the opium wars. The opium wars are just a recent invention, and who knows at what levels of involvement happen. And again, if you're sitting on the sovereign funds and you're basically kind of disempowered because of how the world is changing, and you're going, okay, look, I got to hold my nose while I conduct this business, but I will be taking this and putting it aside, and when the world gets right, here you go. If it's just, when you at certain levels, you go, oh, well, that's dirty money. Dirty money. Like you pick it up and you go, oh, I can smell opium. I mean, again, this is our minds. This is ignorance. Okay, what can we do? We can wake up. All right. I mean, look at what's going on in the Ukraine. I mean, the Western world has some real clowns. The uber clowns that I see are in the Ukraine. I don't want to go there, okay? But you still have a lot of people who are supporting it. Now, I do see that support breaking down. I can't see that staying together. I mean, not that there won't be die-hard people who have that kind of, let's call it Nazi spirit, and want to be associated with Europe rather than the East and all that other stuff. Rather than it's like, don't you care about your family? Do you really care if you're associated with this side of your country, which is Europe, or this side of your country, which is Asia and Russia? I mean, this again, they're playing on. That's why they plant those socialist seeds. You want to be with Europe, well, they don't want you to be with Europe. And again, polarity, ignorance, ignorance, and that's the formula of dysfunction. Hong Kong. They have freedom of speech, and really why the Chinese government wants to hand pick who gets voted for, because they're cleaning up their act, and they have to keep the sociopaths out, and they know who the sociopaths are now. When you finally make a decision, I know where I'm at and what I'm going to do. It's very clear who's a sociopath and who's not, especially when you're talking with them. You're sitting at a table. You get to know these people. And also security people know what they do, when the camera's on, and they get a sense of, who are the good people and who aren't. And all the Chinese want to do for Hong Kong is make sure when they're voting, they're not voting for scoundrels. And so all these protests are, of course, from the NGOs, the shit stirrers, the people who whack hornets' nests. And so there's two kinds of, we see like the ignorance of the protesters in Hong Kong, who are being stirred up to think that because the Chinese party wants the right to vet who they're going to vote for, that this somehow is an interruption of their democracy, which is based on ignorance of voting for criminals. So you can just see there's this whole paradigm of polarity and the ignorance that's created by it. I think I might have another thought there, but I didn't get to it. And it's really, the EU and the USA, because of who is running their policy, has to go as it is. Like when we say the EU and the USA are going down, and as they stand, they have to go down, and they have to continue to go down until they can't stand anymore, because they are the criminals and they are the problem at that level. The other level are the people who are governed, who just who take them as legitimate. Anybody who holds criminals as legitimate has culpability and giving the criminals credibility. I mean, really, if you walked in front of a mirror and you saw no reflection, you might wonder if you really exist. And the people are a reflection of the criminals. Honestly, I mean, it's a harsh reality. But if everybody had it, when you look, they would disappear. Really, the pivot now is to the east. That's where the coherency is. The coherency is now in the east. The west is senile and it just it's in hospice, really. There's always a chance for miraculous recovery, but it's going out. The IMF is a criminal organization. The USA is an oligarchy. Fear is control, and that's what the media is about. You could sit and hear ISIS is coming, and you could hear just one horror. The dollar's collapsing. I mean, whatever half an hour of horror you listen to, and then go outside on a nice day and look up and hear the birds sing and realize that there's no tanks coming down your road. You haven't even seen a soldier. Oh, somebody just waved hello to you. Which is the real world? Which is the real world, really? The one that you can actually experience when you step out into the organic world, or the world that you get through the Matrix world you get through your TV? And if you remember the Matrix movie, when you saw the tubes in them, we don't have the tubes in us. We sit in front of it. We insert the tube ourselves. And whenever anybody is in the mood for it, pull out your own tube. I know many of us are in families seeing people inserting the tube as soon as they get home. And then they sit there and then the tube is in until they go to bed. And then they'll have tube dreams. It's serious dysfunction. 45 minutes. Okay, afraid. This is my own. Afraid. Okay, again, this fear. The other thing we want to ask ourselves is when we have a sense of fear, what we need to ask ourselves, what are we afraid of? And then ask ourselves, is this matrix or organic? Okay, I mean, if you're outside and you're picking some berries and a bear comes up, you might go, ooh, this could get dicey, all right? That's, again, it's not you have to be feared. Usually, especially if you throw your berries at the bear will want the berries. Who cares about you? She doesn't want to eat you, want some berries. But whenever you're dealing with fear, ask yourself, what is my data stream? Like, again, if you have a bear coming towards your berries, it's a good time to move along, But it's and it's a reasonable concern based on organic presence. That's the whole, if it's or if it looks like it's going to be a really nasty thunderstorm with lightning, you might want to get inside, because there is the possibility you could be struck by lightning and you might not survive it. And even if you survived it, you might not like it. So that's the whole thing about, the fear and control. I mean, where is your information coming from? And if your main fear comes from TV, and you know that the people sitting there are reading scripts written by people who want you in fear. I mean, again, the media is a control. So the other thing is to start being conscious enough to know what your data streams are that create fear in you. And then ask yourself, is this fear real? I mean, again, we don't doubt, any number of things. If you're up high on the ladder and you're like, oh, okay, that's reasonable. Okay, I mean, you don't want to give in to fear, because you want to keep your balance. But that caution is reasonable. And so that's the thing. When you're feeling that little fear or caution, ask yourself, what is the data that you're reacting to? And is that data source reasonable? Is it, can you trust it enough to react to it? And, I think I made that point. Media. I mean, really, the media is the cabal. I mean, that's where all the programming is. Your view of the world is shaped by the media, and if you sit in front of a TV, you have the worldview they want you to have. And I might, numerology, Fox, okay, F-O-X, okay? F is the 6th letter, O is the 15th letter, 1 and 5 is 6, and X is the 24th letter. Fox is written large, 666. That's what Fox stands for. The media are definitely guilty of crimes against humanity, and even the constant making primitive of the Islamic culture, and the whole misunderstanding of Sharia. Of course, they always give you Sharia from the most superstitious, ignorant villages in the world. Like, again, many of the tribes in Afghanistan are truly medieval. All right, but we were medieval when we encountered the Moors in Spain. We thought the earth was flat. And don't forget, Columbus, fortunately Columbus knew better, but all of Europe thought the world was flat, and he was sailing off the end of the world. Well, the Moors didn't think. That's probably why. The Moors didn't think that. They had science. The interesting thing with Christianity is because they labeled the whole world, the whole civilization that came prior to Jesus. This is another reason why we had to rebuild civilization, is the Christian church took this whole civilization of thousands of years, and because they weren't Christians, tossed it. This is all pagan, devil worshipper knowledge. No matter they were built, like the great aqueducts of Rome, built by pagans. Oh, we can't build aqueducts, it must be a work of the devil. This is the kind of ignorance that the Catholic Church brought to Europe, purposefully. And so when basically science in Europe got restarted during the Crusades, when the Europeans were going and meeting the Muslims, and they found out the Muslims had astronomy and hygiene, sewer technology. It was astounding how much science came with the Islamic world, and that's the reason why. Because the Islamic world, when they switched over, when they had their revelation of Muhammad for themselves, they didn't ditch the past, and they carried it, and then Europe picked up on it, and did their very diabolical things with it. But we have to stop with the concept that the Muslims are like this backward people. And interestingly enough, if you almost follow the same, like if you start Christianity at, 2,000 years ago, and then you get to our own dark ages, which is around 1200, 1300. I mean, it really wasn't until the Renaissance that things picked up, opened up, and the church's darkness was cast off. But the church didn't start out that dark. It just got darker and darker. And similarly, you have the brilliance of Islam was in its early stages. And so when the Europeans were meeting the Muslims in Spain, they were just not even quite coming up on 1,000 years, like 700, 800 years into their culture. Now, as we get into the modern time, almost if you were following the same trajectory of starting, if like our BC, 0 BC, if you take the revelation of Muhammad in the 600s and then count forward to here, interestingly, they're in their own arc of where we were and where the Christians were in their own dark ages. So that, cycles need to be understood. Disempowering sociopaths. And how do you do that? You don't believe them. Again, they have no reflection other than the reflection you give them. If you don't recognize them, they will go away. This is all about us ending our own ignorance. And again, it's not knowing. This isn't about being stupid. This is just about not knowing. And then if it seems like you might have to put a little effort, you go, nah, I'd rather not. I'm comfortable here. That's ignorance. Okay, yeah, Kabul equals sociopaths. Okay, that's one page. I still have another page, but I'm going to try to go this fast. Okay, GMOs. Who buys them, right? Okay, GMOs. We're all GMOs. Stop GMOs. Stop buying them. End of story. I don't even want to get into that. All right. I know everybody has their excuses why. If you buy it, I mean, I don't buy GMOs. I've been buying organic produce for 25 years, and I don't compare prices. There's real food, and there's crap, and I don't compare crap to real food in pricing. I only look at real food and it costs what it costs. I don't look at the junk and go, oh, it costs less. Of course it costs less. All right. Escape mentality. Oh, yeah. Raptures. Who wrote the prophecies? Okay? That's my own kind of question. But please understand that all this stuff is all disempowerment. It plays very well. You have these people who think that all they have to do is keep on praying and wait till that moment, and then everything is fixed, and they didn't have to really work for it. They were told all I had to do was pray, and prayer is great, but again, prayer is a personal inner work that we do. Creating the world is an outer work. It's done with hands and minds. Where's the money? Everybody's like, oh, they have so much money. Where is the money? Excuse me a second. So basically, the money is there, and they're slowly paying off debts and trying to get. Behind the scenes, they're trying to make people give it up. It's like nobody. They've been doing their best to make this as trauma-free as possible, and you could even call it probably the equivalent of golden parachutes, but the psychopaths are not interested, and the sociopaths are not interested. They have something to prove, and it might even be racist, at some levels. So they're slowly paying off debts. Debt is slavery. If you owe somebody money, they're your master. Try and do something about that. Temple trading. Yes. Remember Jesus drove the money changers out of the temple. Well, basically what you see, the money changes are the same thing that you're seeing with the US dollar. When you have to convert, what they basically did is most money of the realm always had the picture of the sovereign on the coin. And so the temple priest played the whole thing, oh, God will find that, no idols. So that was unacceptable. So the whole thing was you would have to trade in your money for an acceptable piece of money. I can guarantee you, like let's say you had a tenth of an ounce of silver with the thing on it. Well, they would take your tenth of an ounce of silver and probably the appropriate they either charge the fee, or they might give you the appropriate piece of silver, which would have no deity on it and maybe weigh 1/8 or 9/10 of an ounce of silver. So they get to keep your silver, and if it's so offensive, they melt it down, and that can please God. But anyway, they were making a profit. That's what it was. It was an exchange. That's what the money changes were. And then they made their own rules that you cannot use your money. You can only use our money. And this is what the United States is doing with the dollar. All right. So understand that the money changes that Jesus drove out of the temple are the same money changes. That's what the U.S. dollar is. Okay. It's the same exact scam. So maybe it's time for us to all be our own Jesus and chase the money changes out of our temple, because they're just the same. They're just spoiling it. Try and get the rage Jesus had, and we'll have no problem getting rid of it. The problem is we don't have that real indignation. We're more indignant over somebody might have said something the wrong way, or the Dragon family's doing this, but this is just another slave system. This is the beginning. People play all that stuff rather than getting angry at the very obvious criminals in their face. The event, right? The event. Martin asked about the event. I can't. The ambassador was good enough to speak on it. For me, the event is like, oh please, that's the event is like a rapture. It's like, for non-religious people who don't hold to a rapture, somebody has invented the event. Now, of course, there is an event happening, but in polarity thinking, events are things that happen. There's a crystallization point, rather than organically, like an event like somebody planted some grass seed. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? I don't know. Maybe you want to come back in a week or so. So the event is happening. The event has happened, and the event really began when the Red Dragon and his family and the ambassador and people like them woke up and said, okay, we've been playing this game, we're sitting on this stuff, it's time for, we've been the keepers, okay, it's time for us to lower down our end of the bridge. And the big part of the message is, by the way, you guys, our bridge is coming down, you need to bring one down too, okay, because we have to meet. Because if you want what's here, we need a bridge to get it to you. In other words, we need to build our Silk Road. So the whole event, they don't want to promote an event, and I don't blame them, because it'll be traumatizing. So anyway, but to help the event along, we need accountability from our politicians by the people, all right, and realizing people are the power. He made it a point of Ceausescu, how he was like the supreme ruler. He had massacred some people. I don't know, in the time, weeks, days, whatever before. And but he realized he had kind of overstepped. He was trying to make things good, and everything was going good. And then he said a few things because the people were paying attention. And as he was speaking, and the people were getting, oh, what's going on here? And of course, you always have the military. And if people really react to the bullshit that their politicians say, soldiers will pick up on that. But if they all just kind of go ooh, and say nothing while it's happening, and then they go home and everybody go, oh, I didn't really like that. There's a time and a place for maximum leverage, and when we're all together, is a very good time for groups of people to let the rest of their society know, like police and soldiers, that the people you're protecting, we don't agree with them, and you're supposedly on our side, even though with the police can't be on our side. They were never hired to be on our side. The police were always hired to protect the power from the people, and then they became revenue. That's why they hand out tickets, fines. What a disgusting system. Accountability of petitions by the people. And just remember, please, the Berlin Wall coming down was not quote-unquote an event. It was an event on TV, but it was the people, and there was a surrender. The USSR was broken as a spirit, And so things started coming down. It was and the coming down of the wall. Nobody came with with a big bulldozer and just knocked it down. I mean, people were using sledgehammers to bring it down chunk by chunk. The people really brought down, and Ceausescu and the people doing that. That was a huge linchpin for that coming down. Really, I would say the execution of Ceausescu and his family was the absolute, that was pulling the plug out of what the end of, like, shall we say, the Soviet arena. And please, Soviet is not Russian. Soviet is a period in Russian history. Ceausescu, okay, changing the world. I mean, really, it's about responsibility.